I think the most interesting thing about Genshin having 4 different dubs is that it gives us a lot of insight onto each and every aspect of a character, because with each different dub we're receiving 4 different people's unique perspectives on said character, and what traits shine through and embody them the most. In addition, parts that go more hidden beneath the surface can also be brought to light through each person's different rendition. So let's get started and take a deep dive into how each of Ganyu's dubs change her personality.
但我的确是离月七星的使者，我是甘雨，月海亭的秘书，为见你们而来。自上次仙众将离月港的监督之权交还给百姓之后，我便已经知道，离开离月只是时间问题。拥有仙人血脉的我，在离月港其实并没有容身之所。为了炎王帝君。
Beginning with Chinese, which I like to view as her actual voice, since she's from Liyue, which is essentially just ancient China. Ganyu's voice in this dub more than anything stands out as being the most melancholic of the 4, while also carrying a gentleness to it and having a touch of mysteriousness as well. All tie into the most integral part of her character, that being that she's half human and half adeptus, and feeling like she doesn't exactly belong among either group. The sadness and internal conflict she's constantly weighed down by because of this is very present in her voice in Chinese. She has an insanely heavy emotional load to carry around with her every day, and these dark feelings make her sound tired in addition, which would explain why she's always napping at the worst times in the worst places imaginable. As for the gentleness, it matches with the passiveness of the Adepti and her way of life overall. Despite being overworked, Ganyu has spent much of her life in nature, appreciating the small things. And as for the final thing, that being mysteriousness, Ganyu's existence in itself inherently is pretty mysterious. After all, of the playable characters, she's only one of 2 people with Adeptus blood within her, the other being Yanfei. And aside from these 2, I really don't think we've met anyone else in Teyvat like them. Adepti hooking up with humans and having children with them seem to be quite the rarity, mostly because of Rex Lapis's suggestion for the Adepti to stay away from the humans. So anyways, Ganyu's existence in itself is something that I imagine would raise much intrigue in those around her.
However, I am an emissary of the Liyue Qixing. My name is Ganyu, secretary at the Yue High Pavilion, and I have come specifically to meet you. When the Adepti entrusted humans with overseeing Liyue, I knew it was only a matter of time until I had to leave. My Adepti blood makes me unwelcome in Liyue Harbor. For Rex Lapis!
Next is her English dub. I feel it bears some similarities to Chinese. In this dub, Ganyu sounds very calm, collected, and grounded, which is not only soothing to listen to, but overall gives the impression that she's both very wise and reliable. And her work ethic definitely testifies to that, seeing as she practically never leaves her desk and works overtime almost constantly. There's also a bit of a rigidity to it that shows us how seriously she takes her job, which also reminds us how serious she tends to take certain things in general, such as her commitment to Rex Lapis and the people of Liyue. However, I think this carries over into her other non-work related voice lines as well, and as a result, we don't get as much of an opportunity to see what other emotions are laying beneath the surface of her professionalism. So maybe in its own way, the English dub actually is mysterious, in the sense that we know there's more going on, but she never alludes to it. Another thing I think her English dub does well is making her sound older, and as such, making her sound more mature. I think a lot of people tend to forget how old Ganyu truly is. In fact, it's somewhere around 3,000 years old, and she's the 3rd oldest character in the game, with only Cloud Retainer and Zhongli besting her. Ganyu has lived through enough lifetimes to have become a very wise and knowledgeable individual, and I think her English dub conveys this more serious side of her best.
確かにリーユエ七世の使者ですが、私は関羽、月海帝の秘書です。あなたたちに会うためにここに来ました。この前、仙人たちがリーユエ公の監視役を民に引き渡してから、いつかは私もリーユエを離れるのだと悟りました。仙人の血を持つ私に、リーユエ公での居場所はありません。元王帝君のために
Ganyu's Japanese dub takes a different approach than the other four, in the sense that Ganyu's anxiety is the focus. Personally, I think it's very fitting because sadness can often manifest into anxiety and insecurity. And though Ganyu's sadness has been expressed in the other dubs, I feel like her insecurities themselves haven't exactly manifested much into her voice like they do in Japanese, despite them having a tendency to come up quite often. The most prevalent one being her adeptus traits, but more specifically her horns. She's always sure to tell people that they're hairpieces rather than a natural part of her body, in fear of people treating her differently and then her becoming isolated even further. Ganyu is constantly battling within herself whether or not she belongs among the humans or the adepti. And this internal conflict, in addition to her insane workload, is surely the cause of her perpetual state of anxiety. The uncertainty she feels as she tries to navigate her sense of self is very evident in her quiet and almost shaking tone of voice whenever she speaks. This self-doubt also manifests into fear as we see her run away and back into the world of the adepti, when she had a misunderstanding with those at the Qixing and came to the false conclusion that she was going to be replaced. Despite appearing to be so collected most of the time, she obviously has moments in which she acts fairly impulsively. Expressing anxiety and even shyness in moments like this is a perfect direction to go in with her. This shyness also gives her a soft and gentle vibe all around, but underneath that softness lies a burning ferocity that I don't think is really present in the other dubs. During her battle voice lines, her voice becomes significantly lower, more serious, and a lot more fierce. Ganyu fought in the Archon War after all, so there is still a warrior within her, and though she wants to avoid conflict at all costs, when it arises, she'll do whatever she can to protect those dearest to her. This is very in tune to her Qilin half. The final thing I'd like to add before I move on is that her fallen voice lines in Japanese are just so heartbreaking. Not only the words she's saying, as in her last breath she asks Rex Lapis to forgive her for failing her duty to him, but more specifically the delivery.
ごめんなさい。契約はまだ終わっていない。
The first time I heard them, they really took me off guard. Like, they're too good. Reina really popped off with these.
저는 리월 칠성의 사절, 월의정의 비서 가무예요. 당신들을 만나기 위해 왔습니다. 지난번 선인들의 리월항의 감독권을 백성들에게 넘겼을 때부터 전 알고 있었죠. 제가 리월을 떠나는 건 시간 문제라는 거려. 선인의 혈통을 가진 전 더 이상 리월항에 설 자리가 없습니다.
아멍 제군을 위하여.
Last but certainly not least, we have her Korean dub. I typically don't pay much attention to the Korean dub as it's the language I know the least about, but I'm honestly so enamored by this dub, and I feel like I've seriously been missing out. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly what I like about it because there are so many things. However, if I had to, I think the things that stand out the most to me is that it carries a sense of gracefulness and elegance, which isn't something we've heard at all in the other three dubs, despite it being a very core part of Ganyu's nature. And I genuinely probably would have continued to fail to notice this had I not heard this dub. The gentle way she carries herself, her connection to nature, her fierce will to honor tradition and uphold her duties to her nation, and finally, even just her outfits, all embody this side of her. Also, this is a side of her that admittedly is very Qilin, so I love that we're able to see more of her adeptus nature. Another thing I love about her Korean dub is that it has some of the traits of the other dubs, specifically the mysteriousness she has in Chinese and the calmness she has in English. A lot of her good character qualities seem to come together in Korean, and we really get to witness firsthand every time she speaks how multifaceted she actually is. So listening to this dub was certainly eye-opening. So with all of these different takes on Ganyu in mind, which is the most accurate to her actual character? I truthfully can't say that any of them are the best at capturing all of Ganyu, because they all focus on bringing out very specific parts of her personality while lacking in other areas. However, I honestly think it's really insightful that each dub allows us to analyze each part of her character more thoroughly. And because of this, I think all of her dubs are great, and I'm grateful to all four of her voice actresses for bringing Ganyu to life with their talents. But with all of this being said, her English dub is actually my favorite. And that draws the conclusion to this video. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. So just a little bit of an afterword here. I wanted to talk about why I wanted to make this video. The reason is I feel like Ganyu gets slept on a lot. Like, I know she's an old character and like there's not really much reason to talk about her anymore, but I really like Ganyu. She's my third favorite in Genshin, and I feel like she definitely deserves deserves a lot more love than she gets. Just like that whole feeling of not belonging and trying to find her place in the world, I think is really prevalent in a lot of people's lives, including my own. So she really connects to me on a personal level, and that's why I wanted to talk about her. And it's interesting to see how all these different sides of her that tie into this core struggle of hers get portrayed in each of the dubs. So yeah, this was definitely a fun video to make. I would love to make more, but being the only person making this, it's very time consuming and pretty exhausting, so I'm not sure realistically how much of this I can make, but I'll try. So I'll see you guys next time.